and welcome to this week's take. We're actually going to do something a little bit different this time. I want to actually take a look at the Sutton Hoo ship burial. This is actually one of my favorite excavation sites, and I've loved to teach it every single year for, I don't know, like a decade. And so I was really excited to see that there was actually going to be a movie made about this called The Dig. Now, I have not watched The Dig, but I have heard that it is more or less accurate, but some things are not quite factual to what happened in the real excavation. So since this is something that I absolutely love, I did want to kind of give you guys a rundown on the information we actually know about this dig. Now, there's so much to look at that means that I'm not going to be able to get to everything in one video. So we're going to break this up into several different smaller videos. This one, we're going to kind of go over the cast of characters that are actually kind of important to the actual story, so that when we get into it, you guys are a little bit more familiar with who we're actually talking about. Now, of course, we've got to start with Edith Pretty, and Edith Pretty actually came from a wealthy industrial family. That had allowed her to actually travel around the world with her family, and her father was also involved in some small-scale excavations. And so the idea of actually being curious about what was in the ground was not so far removed from what Edith Pretty was used to. Now, Edith and her late husband, Frank, had actually purchased the land of Sutton Hoo after they were married, and Edith could actually see the hills from her house. And so you can imagine someone with a natural curiosity about the world and also a natural curiosity about excavations looking out at those mounds might start to get a little bit curious. I know I would. And so what ends up happening is after her husband dies, she actually gets involved in kind of spiritualism and kind of talking to seers and people who are kind of connected with the spirit world. This was not that unusual for this time period. A lot of wealthy women from kind of her class were actually interested in these kinds of activities. And so one of the things we're actually told is either Edith or one of her friends actually has a vision of kind of a ghostly procession around the mounds. And so if that story is indeed actually true, you can imagine that that only added some fuel to the fire. And that is when Edith actually contacts the Ipswich Museum, her local museum, and inquired about actually having the mounds excavated. They point Edith to Basil Brown. Now, Basil Brown was a local amateur archaeologist. He was kind of self-taught. He'd been kind of going around and doing excavations in that kind of an area and kind of gained a bit of a reputation for the work he had done. And so Edith Pretty had contacted Basil Brown in order to have him come and do the excavation for her. One of the things that I absolutely love about this story is that Edith Pretty actually lends two of her employees to Basil Brown to help him out. One of them is Jack Jacobs, who is actually her gardener, which I love, and he is the one who actually finds kind of the first evidence in the big mound in which the treasure trove was actually found. And so he kind of has an important part of this story because he doesn't know anything about excavations, he doesn't know anything about kind of the process, he doesn't know what he's really doing, he's just kind of there helping out. And I love that he was involved in something of such magnitude. Now, when Basil Brown finds the ships in the burials, he assumes that it is going to be a Viking burial, and so he actually starts to inquire about Viking ship burials. And these inquiries start to turn into rumors that start to spread out across England, and it comes to the attention of Charles Phillips, who is a professional archaeologist located at Cambridge at that time. So he gets curious and decides to find out about what is going down at Sutton Hoo. And he visits the site, and as he's walking up, he can start to see that Basil Brown has uncovered a massive ship. And so he starts to realize that this was not an ordinary ship, and it was not really like the other ship burials that had been found. And so he gets on the phone pretty fast, calling his friend saying, hey, we've got something really spectacular down here at Sutton Hoo. It is Mr. Phillips who is actually put in charge of the dig at that point, but Basil Brown is kept on and he continues to work on the ship. Mr. Phillips actually brings in several professional archaeologists to start to work on the portion of the ship that would be assumed to be the part in which maybe the burial chamber would be. And actually one of the people who finds the first of the treasure is actually Margaret Guido, and so she finds a very small gold and garnet piece, and it's from that find that they start to realize that they have an Anglo-Saxon burial instead of a Viking burial. So this gets everyone in an absolute tizzy because it's a very, very exciting find. And of course, after that, the finds just start coming and coming and coming and coming. All right, you guys, that is our cast of characters that we are going to be looking at as we go through and look at the Sutton Hoo ship burial. I hope that you guys are excited about looking at this. It is a spectacular sight, and I'll see you guys on the next take.